So the first time I went to Russia was in 1989 in Perestroika, and I went on a school trip. And at the time, I think McDonald's was just about to open, and you could only buy things in hard currency shops. But what I loved about Russian, and I met many Russian people and school students, and they were very, very kind and warm. And from there, I fell in love with the Russian soul. Русский человек прекрасная душа. And from there, I got a big interest in Russian history and culture, and its difference in the West, but its deep heart and meaning. And I've always loved Russian history, and I read more and more, and had a big passion, especially for Ivan III, and up to the 16th century, and then fell in love with the Russian royal family, and then discovered your wonderful authors. And I started to read Dostoevsky, and there was nothing so deep in the soul that hit me. One of the things that I really love about Russia is that they understand sacrifice and also redemption. I have friends in Russia, in Moscow, and I have friends also in Donetsk and St Petersburg that I am in contact with. But most of my friends are in London, in the Russian community in England. However, I have friends, for instance, Yulia, who used to work here, who is now in Moscow, who I'm friends with on Facebook. So I have quite a lot of contacts in Russia, but most of my friends are in England that are Russian. So my background is I worked for many years in advertising, in an advertising agency, and at the time I was living the high life. So this was just after a period. My mum died when I was 19, and from when I was about 19 to 33, I was very much partying a lot, going to nightclubs, drinking, and just kind of very enjoying myself in a kind of secular kind of way. But I realised I was destroying my soul during the process. However, I used to go to Russia a lot for holidays, and I loved Russia very, very much, and I've been going there since 1989. But I used to go there to go to the nightclubs and to go partying and to enjoy myself. And then one day, I woke up with a very, very bad head because I'd been drinking, and I think I got in about 4 o'clock in the morning, and I saw Alexander Nevsky Sobor Monastery. So I thought, I will go and have a look and see what is happening in here. So I went in, and I went and viewed the liturgy, and as I viewed the liturgy, I just started crying. And you know, with Prince Vladimir, he says on the conversion that his aides said they did not know whether they thought they were in heaven. And I felt at that time that I was in heaven. I witnessed the liturgy, and the liturgy impacted on every one of my senses, from my eyes to my ears to my smell. But at the same time, I felt the presence of God, and I felt my mum, who had died of cancer, was with me, and I felt I should change my life. Before that, I didn't believe in God. When I walked out of the monastery, I believed in God. So it was just an instant kind of capture of my soul at the right time. And God I felt very blessed because he helped change my life and move it in a different direction. It's a very good question. So I've been very, very blessed. So becoming Orthodox opened up a new world to me in terms of my mind. It allowed me to discover new books, new authors, new worlds. Very, very few people in England would have ever heard of Moldavia or Georgia. Very, very few people know about the Byzantine. But the other thing that's really hit me is it's given me lots of experiences. So it's allowed me to go to many places. So I've been to Pichayev, I've been to Moscow, I've been to St Petersburg, I've been to Novgorod, I've been to Belarus, which I love very much, which I will talk about my love of Belarus later. I've been to Putitsa in Estonia, and also Mount Athos, and Bari as well. So I've been very, very many places, and every place I go to, I feel very, very blessed. And every place I learn different things. And for me, I think every time I go to a different place, I have a different experience in my soul. And there's not one that's particular special for me in that kind of sense, but I'm always learning. Mount Athos is very special for myself and my soul, and I have lots of experiences there. I've been 8 times to Mount Athos and love it very much, and I love the fathers. But I think every monastery has a different purpose, in my opinion. Obviously, they all serve God, but some are very, very strong and powerful, and you feel strength. Others, you feel kind of love. So it varies from place to place. So my friends used to go to Mount Athos a lot, because I go to a Russian church. And they would keep saying to me, Steve, come to Mount Athos, come to Mount Athos. And I was like, no, I don't feel right. And then one day it was coming to Pascha, I think 4 years ago. And they said, come with me to Mount Athos. And I was like, that sounds like a wonderful idea and a wonderful kind of plan. So I went there first 4 years ago. I stayed for Pascha. And then 3 weeks after, I left, and then I came back again, more or less straight away. And from there, I started to travel to many different of the monasteries. The main monasteries I go to is Zograf, Vetopedi, and also St Andreas Skit. But St Andreas Skit, I have a very, very strong relationship with the elder there, Elder Ephraim, and some of his fathers, and one of my spiritual father is there as well. And they've given me a lot of advice and helped me in the world. And often the fathers will come and visit us in London and the community. Some of the wonderful things, though, is that Athos has allowed me to push myself very, very far. So I managed to climb up to the mountain on a donkey, or a half donkey, half horse. So we have to thank the donkey and horse for taking me up there. But that was a wonderful experience. And also, I swam for the cross at Theophany in Vetopedi. So they threw the cross in and I swam. And I didn't quite come first, but I come third and managed to get it in the winter in Athos. And it's a great blessing every time I go there. So unfortunately, when I first went to the cathedral, he had died. I think it's 2 years. I went 2 years after his death. So I go to both the cathedral in Knightsbridge, Sourozh, but also to church abroad as well. So I go to both. I think one of the wonderful things about Metropolitan Anthony, from talking to people that knew him very, very well, is the fact that he's a real true apostle to the West and also apostle of love. And every word that he writes, you really feel like it's a witness of Christ. And he's talking about Christ and talking about Christ within the heart. So I think that's a big lesson to all of us, that we should continue to love and see others truly as an icon of Christ. And I think going to both the church abroad and also to Sourozh has given me a wide understanding of the many different types of emigres that come after a revolution. And one of the things you learn from Metropolitan Anthony on one side to Bishop Nicodeme on the other is that they all had a big sense of suffering. And reading their stories and the suffering of the exiles makes you, in a way, understand how blessed and lucky we are in today's age. We have different problems, but we don't have the war and the starvation and the suffering that they went through. They were true witness of kind of Christ. And I think during that time there was many stories of suffering. And one of the things I've been doing since I've become Orthodox is looking after the Orthodox graves, because many people's graves in a very, very bad state. Metropolitan Anthony's grave is always well looked after, but some of the others are in decay. Some are princes from the royal family and very, very high nobility. So every year, about twice a year, I go with a team of lovely people, and we tidy up the graves to make them very, very beautiful. So I think St Elisabeth is a wonderful example of someone that suffered for Christ, but also was a witness for Christ. And I think she was out there helping people and helping the suffering and helping the poor. And I think her example of her life from her unfortunate kind of death, but all the way through from kind of the beginning, is an amazing journey of how the West and Russia can come together as kind of one and be united through brothers and sisters in Christ. And I think the help that you do and the spirit and following her spirit of care and attention is a wonderful. Even to the point of when she was dying, she was still helping people. We can read a lot about Orthodoxy and we can enjoy the services, but for me, we need to live and breathe Christ as much as we can. And we do that through love and helping other people and our fellow man and woman. A wise priest, because I'm not a theologian, so I'm not very educated, but a wise priest once says to me, as Orthodox people, we will be judged what not we do for people, but what we did not do. And I think there's many times we can constantly think, what more can we do for people? Because even though the world is softer in the sense that we don't have war or famine, we do not sacrifice for others as much now. We've become obsessed with the I and we've forgotten about the we. I think that's right. You're a very open kind of community. I've been very, very impressed and deeply, deeply touched by everything that you do here on several different levels. So I think the concerts you do, and when you go to the markets and when you go to the West, you act as a beautiful apostle to introduce people to Orthodoxy. And someone had told me that one person recently had actually converted by talking to one of your sisters in a market. So that in itself is a wonderful, wonderful thing. And rather than going there and telling people about the Bible, as Protestants do, and everyone goes, no, I don't. You teach people through love and through music and through craft and beautiful things. I think one of the things that I love about this place is that we live in a world that is very, very fast and very, very hard. So everyone is concerned only by themselves. We ignore our neighbours. We're on the internet all the time. We're constantly looking at screens and we feel very, very lost. We don't know who we are and we're losing our sense of identity. And because of that, I think we're losing a lot of kindness and we're not kind to other people. I see it in the West all the time and I always say that we're declining kindness. But as a monastery, what you give is through the grace of God, and it's a miracle how much you've done in such a short time, is you provide people with the gift of time. And time is kindness. And you've got lots of attention to detail, from everything from your mosaics to the artwork to the way everything looks and the beautiful objects that you have. But you give attention to people's soul. So from Father André, the way he does his talks and the way he listens to everyone and gives them kind of advice, to when he blesses people with water and the other priests, and they do it individually, one by one, through the way you bless, the priests bless, which is very, very, very slowly, through the nuns when they're having conversations with people, and you can see that you're very much, you give the gift of kindness to people, and you give the gift through the gift of time. So everyone you give time. And when I went into the Royal Martyrs Church, you have an anchor. It's a symbolism in the baptism pool. And what you do, which I think is really wonderful, is you act as an anchor in people's lives. And people need that because times are so hard. But you also give people independence and freedom to lift the anchor up and sail themselves into the world. And the work you're doing to help other people is wonderful. And it's, we're all kind of children of God, and we take 2 steps forward, we're like children, and we fall over. But you're helping people stand back up by their feet, and that's touching and a miracle of God. Slova Bogom. I think the biggest change has been within my heart, and not to be kind of selfish. But Orthodoxy saved my life. So I was, in a metaphor, I was driving a car through drink and addictions and through bad feelings very, very fast, and I was about to hit a wall. So Orthodoxy has changed my life. But I think one of the things that it's helped me do is understand myself and who I am as a person. Slova Bogom. So I was born with a disability, so I have what's called a lobster hand. I wear these splints on my leg. I have 2 toes on one and 4 toes on the other. I have a missing fibia and a shortening of a tibia in the legs. And for many years I was lucky, and I was brought up by a mum who kind of encouraged me to walk. So when I was born, the doctor said I would never be able to walk, and she made me get up. So I was very, very blessed in that I've always been pushed to do many things. But my disability is a cross, and in my opinion, we're all disabled because we all have our own crosses. But what it's allowed me to do is to realise it's not just a cross, but actually it's a blessing. And because of my disability, I want to become Orthodox, and because of my disability, through Orthodoxy, I wouldn't have gone to many different countries. I wouldn't have gone to Mount Athos. I wouldn't have wonderful friends from around the world, from Russia, from Ukraine, from Georgia, from Belarus. So it's opened up a new world, but it's allowed me to accept and be very, very happy and thankful to God every day for who I am and the blessings that I've received. And I think it's very much for me the path of Orthodoxy, because I think the only time where I'm very Orthodox is after communion, because to be Orthodox you have to fly totally straight, and we're always falling over, we're never quite there. But what Orthodoxy, or the journey through Orthodoxy, has done, it's made me to understand and start to learn how to love other people and have joy in myself. So for me, it was St Stephen the martyr. So for me, the relationship with St Stephen is very strong, because I think we should try and sacrifice for God and for others all the time. And I think I get a lot of strength from the martyrs, because often society makes judgments about other people, and I think disability is something that people make judgments about. And the martyrs were judged by the Romans and by society in a negative way, and I think disabled people are often judged in a negative way. And I think when we think of disabled people, we often give those people pity, or sometimes we feel shame towards them. And that's wrong, because they're icons of Christ. And what we should do is we should learn to love as brothers and sisters and pick people up and allow them to use their gifts for the world. And that's why I love this monastery very much, because you give love and you help and you lift people up that are struggling. I think that's very true. So I think that God gives us all gifts, and we have to understand the gifts that we have. So recently I was reading a book called a short Russian story called The Living Icon. And in that it's about a woman who lies on the bed and all her senses are lifted up. So I think God takes care of people. I mean, your Saint Valentino is a fantastic example of that, and lifting the abilities. And I think one of the wonderful things that we forget, and I think sometimes we make judgments of people with disabilities, but if we looked at the history of the saints, and we looked at the saints, many of the saints had disabilities. So I think that shows you that God does help. I think God helps everyone, and I think God gives talent to everyone in different ways and different abilities. And we should love people for who they are as a soul, in my opinion, and then we should help them have their talent, the talent that God's provided them with. I think be true to yourself, smile, and thank God, I think is what I do, and be happy and look at other people and try and look at them for the icon of Christ. But I think beauty is very interesting, and I think it's one of the problems at the moment that in terms of beauty is very much judged on the outer and how people looks. And for disabled people, one of the big things you see is disabled people in terms of relationships. And people often, societies will say, disabled people maybe shouldn't have relationships. It's wrong, or they will be laughed at or potentially judged. And I think part of that reason is that we look on beauty as being about how someone looks externally. And one of the things I see is that men will often look for a woman, and they look for something that's like a trophy wife. But that gets very, very boring, you know. And I think when we look at dating industry and the internet, it becomes a tick list. So you want a woman who's 6'2", long hair, blue eyes, drives BMW, has a PhD, can speak Greek, and has lived in South Africa. We have shopping lists now. And I think what we don't do is we don't look on the person and look at a person and think, what can I do for that person? How can I love that person? And through that love, the love will be returned through the grace of God. Спасибо большое. Христос воскресе!
Воистину воскресе!